and welcome to Sunday Chat, my video reflection that accompanies Sunday Bible Talk every Sunday as part of an experiment I began last month. My reflection today is for the next Sunday, which is September the 2nd, the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. But my focus is not going to be so much scripture as what's happening in the church today. In SBT, Sunday Bible Talk, I do go into some reflections that are scripturally based. And so today, in my video chat, I would rather just focus on something that's very, very clear to me as I reflect on the clergy abuse scandal that is continuing to unfold. And I apologize to readers who feel that I'm taking too much time with this, but I do believe we're at a watershed moment in the church, and that this experience of clergy abuse has far, far-reaching consequences that go beyond what actually happened to the fallout, and also the fallout in terms of faith and where the church is going and what needs to be done. And so bear with me as I indulge my need to share these reflections. I'm sure this is going to go on for a few weeks, so I hope you will stay with me for the ride. I'm sure there will also be new insights every week as different revelations come to surface. My starting point is actually to share a story with you. I'm not going to give you the details. It'll suffice to say that decades ago, my closest friend in the world was a Catholic priest. And under his influence, I became very interested in theology and undertook a lot of study in terms of theology and scripture and liturgy. And really, I would not be the person I am today with the background I have today if it had not been for our friendship. Everybody put this particular person on a pedestal, myself included. He was a wonderful preacher, a wonderful presider, had great rapport with people in general, very caring, very compassionate, and much loved by everybody. To my shock, I discovered he was leading a double life, and I will not go into the details, they're unnecessary. The shock was so intense for me that it was as though somebody had popped a balloon and somehow all the air had gone out, or all my spiritual grounding seemed to be taken away from me like a rug under someone who's then falling. It was really catastrophic for me, and fortunately there was somebody there who'd gone through a similar experience with my friend, and the two of us were able to support one another. But in this process, I had to come to a decision that if God were not the center of my life, then I was not going to make it through this ordeal. It was such a shattering experience that I really had to turn to basics, and that meant turning to God and realizing that talking about God and studying God are not the same as having a relationship with God. And that was a pretty profound discovery, because certainly my friend and I had discussed God for hours on end. I mean, countless hours of theological discussion, countless hours of looking at scripture. And yet, when the reality hit home, it was that my friend had clay feet and was leading this double life. And so I had a different kind of task ahead of me, and that was spiritual reorientation. I began working with a spiritual director, working very hard. I began studying spirituality as opposed to theology, did a complete overhaul of my own life, took a self-inventory. It was really a moment of conversion for me, and so painful as the experience was, it was a graced moment as well as a painful one. I'm sharing this story because it helps me to understand how many people are feeling right now, and again, similar experiences and feelings have surfaced for me as well. And I too am in a state of shock over all the horrendous revelations that have come to surface. This cesspit, this absolutely disgusting array of criminal activities, with children being the main victims. And so, like many others, I have to ask faith-based questions. What does this do to my relationship with God? What does this do to my relationship with the church? And I know that many people are hurting and many people are asking similar questions. Those who are the survivors of abuse, and I also have to add that not everybody survives the abuse. There have been some who have taken their own lives, or whose lives have been so compromised by alcohol and drug addiction as a result of the abuse that they have no futures on their calendars, you might say. But when I'm thinking of those who are not the victims of the abuse or the survivors of the abuse, we too, those of us who were not abused, need to do some healing. And I'm speaking not just for laity, but I'm also speaking for clergy and religious, that all of us who are suddenly privy to these terrible revelations now need to take stock of everything we held dear, of the people we respected who were leading double lives, of the people who covered up when we thought they were protecting. And so it is then that our own faith is on the line. Those who are survivors of abuse seem to have found community with one another, and they have engaged in their own healing process with or without the help of the church. Those of us who are witnesses to what has happened on account of the revelations have our own kind of healing to do, and this is why I think there is some urgency. What I would like to see happen is to see circles for listening only. Circles where the faithful and the clergy who are faithful and the laity who are faithful, of course, can gather to share their stories, to find healing, to support one another, and basically to see what is shared in common and to listen to one another. Because in telling our stories, in expressing our feelings, and in listening to one another, we then have the opportunity for grace to enter into this terrible place of emptiness, this place of horror and shock. I propose that spiritual directors should be the facilitators of these groups. Having a psychological model is not sufficient. It needs to be somebody who is skilled in group facilitation, somebody who is a person of faith, and so spiritual directors seem to be the logical group of people whose skills are needed at this time. And what I propose is that wherever Catholics gather, whether to study, whether to pray, whether to be in formation, whether to heal, whether to live, wherever there are Catholics who are in a state of shock, there need to be listening circles where we can share with one another our own feelings of disgust and hopelessness and helplessness, and find healing as we listen to one another. So this is my proposal, and I'm hoping that those of you who have listened and taken the time to listen to my reflection will have some response to this. I would be curious to see if anyone would like to start this kind of a community activity, whether online or whether in your own parish, or if you have some suggestion as to how these listening groups could be structured. But I do think this is needed at the moment, especially as revelations continue to surface about clergy abuse. Let us turn this around and make this a watershed moment of grace. Let us, in our listening to God and to one another, find an opportunity to make things new and to rebuild the church. I believe this is what we're called to be doing right now, and I hope that you share my excitement at this possibility, that rather than sit by passively and just listen to bad news, we can make good news happen simply by listening to one another. And this, my friends, is my Sunday chat for September the 2nd, this coming Sunday. I look forward to seeing you the following Sunday as well.